H out to H harvest. The H healing. Power from plants. Introduction. When compared to the timeline of human history, modern medicine hasn't been around that long. Medicine has a much longer history than the modern pharmaceutical industry. Humankind has used medicines for thousands of years. But the medicines used before our modern knowledge of science were natural medicines, making use of the medicinal qualities of what nature provides for us. The herbal medicines that have always existed still work today, just as they have throughout history. What was once our sole medicine still exists, even though the number of people who have knowledge of these natural remedies has dwindled. It is our hope that this book will help you relearn and pass on this lost knowledge. Herbal medicine is often scoffed at by the pharmaceutical industry, and yet it is the grandparent of much of that same modern medicine. Many of today's pharmaceuticals try to replicate what nature provides. Most of what we call medicines are artificial creations that have been slightly chemically altered from nature. This is necessary, as patent laws don't permit filing a patent on something that exists naturally. Thus, the large pharmaceutical labs have to come up with a suitable alternative, and many of their products have serious side effects. This isn't to say that modern-day medicine and herbal medicine can't coexist. They can. But many new medicines can be easily replaced by herbs at a fraction of the cost and risk to both our wallets and our bodies. In a post-apocalyptic world, these herbal medicines may be the only thing available to us. If modern manufacturing and distribution methods become unavailable, we will have to rely on what can be grown locally. Many of those who have knowledge of herbal medicine are already growing and tending the necessary plants and have learned how to turn those plants into usable medicines. One of the advantages of growing and using your own herbs, as opposed to buying herbal supplements at the local health food store, is that you know how fresh they are and how they've been grown. The sooner you can prepare and store your herbs for use, often the more potent they are. At the same time, you will know exactly what is in any herbal mixture that you create, giving you the peace of mind that there are no additives or fillers, and only the herbs you want and need. How to harvest herbs. All herbal medicines start as living beings. They are not always what most people traditionally think of as herbs. Medicines come from trees, flowers, roots, mushrooms, lichens, and more. While those who are interested in herbal medicines tend to grow an herb garden, some are harvested from plants that grow in the wild. It is a useful skill to learn how to identify medicine in the wild. When looking at pictures for plant identification, be sure to look at pictures that depict plants in the various stages of their life cycle. A good plant identification guide for your area is essential. Many people know flower identification, but when the plants are not in flower, they can't identify them. Considering how short the flowering season is for most plants, that severely limits the amount of time for harvest. Before even thinking about harvesting herbs, it is necessary to understand how the herb will be used, specifically, what part of the plant will be used for medicinal purposes. Never assume that the whole plant carries the same chemical compounds. Often, only the leaves or the flower will provide what you need, but in some cases, it will be the bark of a tree or a piece of root that you will need to harvest. It is best to harvest herbs early in the day, after the dew has gone. but before the hot sun can dry out the essential oils. Whenever possible, avoid harvesting the whole plant, unless it is a plant that needs to be collected whole. If you are harvesting leaves, you will usually cut off small branches, making it easier to dry them. For flowers, wait until they develop fully and harvest them as soon as possible after they have fully opened. If you are harvesting only the seeds, you will need to wait until the seeds mature and the seed pod dries on the stem before harvesting. We give harvesting instructions for almost every herb in this book. If you are cutting part of a stem, such as harvesting stinging nettle, be sure to leave at least a few inches of leafy stem, with at least 2 sets of leaves on it, so that the plant doesn't die. Always cut right above the point where the leaves are. With many plants, like basil, you can cut the plant down to 1/3 its original size without killing it. Always reseed, replant, and tend the wild when possible. Harvest ethically and with great care. How to dry herbs. Traditionally, herbs are air dried without the use of any additional heat source. Bundle them together by tying the stems with string or a rubber band and hang in a warm, dry place. It is usually easiest to hang them upside down by the bundled stems to dry. Drying racks may be used for individuals who are drying a lot of herbs or doing so regularly. But you can accomplish the same thing by hanging them from a coat hanger, a nail in the wall, or on a curtain rod over the window. I often spread flowers or leaves on a cookie sheet or pizza pan and let them dry. If you are collecting the seeds, tie a paper bag over the bundled stems and hang them. The bag will catch the seeds as the seed pods dry and they fall out. Drying in this manner can take as long as 3 weeks. Though is often accomplished much faster, depending on the plant and its moisture content. If you are drying something that dries extremely slowly, like rosemary, it is easier to strip the leaves off of the stems and spread them on a drying rack, as the coating of the leaves will hold in the moisture. They need to be fully dry before storing. It is possible to dry herbs with a dehydrator if you have one of the better ones that has temperature control. Ideally, it should have a fan to circulate the warm air, allowing the entire batch to dry evenly. To avoid singing or burning the herbs you are drying, you will need to use the lowest possible temperature. I have used this method successfully many times. If using a dehydrator, it is very important to keep a close eye on your herbs so that you don't leave them to dry too long. Once dried, remove the leaves from the stems. In the case of smaller leaves, you can strip them from the stem by lightly pinching the stem between your thumb and forefinger and running it down the stem, from top to bottom. However, in the case of larger leaves with thicker stems, you will need to cut or pinch them off individually, cutting the stems as near the leaf as possible. Store your dried herbs in sealed glass jars until you are ready to use them. Encapsulating powdered herbs. If you go to the health food store to buy herbs, you'll often find them offered in powdered form, encapsulated. This is a convenient way to store and use herbs, especially if you are using them with people who are unaccustomed to taking herbal remedies. There are 2 ways of encapsulating your herbs, but to start you need to turn the herbs into powder. This is most easily done by grinding them in a food processor or electric coffee mill. If you want to go for a more traditional method or are trying to encapsulate them during a time when there is no electrical power, use a mortar and pestle. If you are going to make any sort of herbal mix, you'll need a scale to measure out your various herbs. Be sure to mix the powdered herbs well, so that your capsules all have the same herbal concentration. Capsules come in 3 sizes, 0, 00 and 000. They can be filled by hand or with the aid of a simple filling machine. The least expensive method is to fill them by hand. To start, put the powder in an oversized bowl. Open the capsules individually by hand, and scoop up the powder in both sides of the capsule, trying to get them reasonably full. Then push the sides of the capsule together. The powder will compress as the capsule slides closed. This is a very boring and time-consuming operation, although effective. You might want some company or some assistance while doing this task. Capsule filling machines. For a slightly more efficient operation, you can buy a simple capsule filling machine. These are available in 50 or 100 capsule sizes and must be bought to match the size capsules you are using. The machine consists of several plates, which have holes to hold the capsule halves and a base. Separate the capsules, putting the 2 parts into separate bowls. The thinner, longer part goes into the base plate on the machine. There is a funnel-like device used to fill this plate. Simply place the funnel over the base plate and pour a quantity of the capsule halves onto it. Shake the machine, until the capsule halves fall into the holes in the plate, ready to be filled. The same basic operation is done with the top plate. The part of the capsules that is in the bottom plate is the part being filled. Pour a quantity of the powdered herbs onto this plate and move it around with the supplied scraper, allowing it to fill the capsules. Once filled, remove any extra powder by scraping it off. To close the now filled capsules, place the top plate over the bottom one. The machine will have aligning pins to ensure that the 2 halves of the capsules are aligned. Then push down on the plates several times, seating the capsules. Remove your finished capsules and put them in a jar for storage. Herbal water infusions, cold and hot methods. Tea and coffee are both infusions, usually hot infusions. Cold versions of these drinks are often still infused hot, and then chilled in the refrigerator or with ice. However, it is possible to make cold infused coffee and tea. The process is just slower. This cold infusion process takes time. The properties of the herbs are simply extracted from the leaves or beans into the water. This same process can be used with just about any herb. The typical means of hot infusing herbs is to make a tea out of it. Herbal teas can be made from individual herbs, but it is more common to use a mixture of herbs that work well to treat the condition you are seeking to heal. The advantage of hot infusion over cold is that it often extracts more of the essential ingredients from the plant tissue. The heat breaks down cell walls, creating a stronger infusion. On the other hand, a hot infusion may also extract ingredients that are not desirable, such as those that give the infusion a bitter flavor. In that case, a cold infusion may be better. Mucilaginous herbs tend to extract better cold, leaving the mucilage intact. Some common herbs we do cold infusions with are lemon balm, marshmallow, slippery elm, and comfrey. Sun tea is probably the most common cold infusion made. Leave the herbs loose, and strain later, or put the crushed leaves in a cheesecloth or muslin bag. You can find these sold as reusable tea bags, and tie it to the top of your jar or cup. For tea, most people simply use 1 to 2 teaspoons of dried herb to 8 ounces, 250 ml of water. Moisten dried herbs before putting them in the cold infusion. This is not necessary for fresh herbs. Leave the cold infusion for at least 48 hours to fully extract the beneficial compounds from the herbs. Teas. Herbal tea is a very common way that herbs are used for medicinal purposes. As mentioned above, an herbal tea is a hot infusion, which works extremely well to extract the beneficial components from many herbs. Hot infusions can be made in a matter of minutes, unlike cold infusions, which take longer. Teas can be made from either fresh or dried herbs, producing different results. Each particular herb will react differently whether it is dry or fresh, so you will want to know what is recommended for that herb or for that herbal mixture. Decoctions. A decoction is a concentrated form of a hot infusion or tea. This can be an extremely useful method for herbs that don't give up their beneficial chemicals easily or for woody parts or roots. It is also a great way of creating a more concentrated form of an herbal supplement, and for use with children, animals, or anyone else who it is unlikely to drink enough of a hot infusion to do them any good. To make a decoction, start with cold distilled or purified water. Cold water is important, to help ensure you extract the maximum amount of beneficial nutrients from the herbs. It is best to make your decoction in an earthenware, glass, or glazed ceramic cooking pot, so that you don't end up with the metal pots reacting to the astringent herbs, affecting the final flavor. Use a ratio of 1 ounce, 28 grams, of dried herbs per 16 ounces. 500 ml, of water. Decoctions are normally made in a quantity that can be used within a couple of days, as they don't keep well in the refrigerator for more than 3 days. If you do need to keep one for more than 3 days, keep it in a tightly sealed container or freeze them. Ice cube trays work well. You may also add 2 tablespoons of alcohol, like vodka, rum, or brandy, per cup, 8 oz, for better preservation. 1 crush, chop or grind the herbs, as appropriate, into small pieces and place them in the cold water in your cooking pot. 2 Allow the herbs to cold soak for a few hours. 3 Cover the pot and bring to a slow boil. Once the water is boiling, reduce the heat to a simmer. 4 Keep simmering until the volume of liquid has been reduced to a half of what you started with. About 15 to 20 minutes. 5 Strain. Cheesecloth works well. Once cooled, squeeze the herbs left behind, to ensure that you have removed all the liquid from them. 6 Pour the decoction into a jar with a lid for storage. Use within 48 hours or freeze. Decoctions contain 4 times more medicine than a tea. Adults in good health can take up to 1 cup of a decoction, 3 times per day, depending on the herb. Children's dosages should be cut, based upon their weight. Double decoctions. Double decoctions are the same as decoctions, with the exception that they are simmered until the final volume equals 1/4 of the original volume of liquid, increasing your final medicinal concentration. Adults should only take 1 terabyte of a double decoction and children up to a half teaspoon for most herbs. Double decoctions are especially useful when decocting shredded bark and dried roots, where the useful compounds come out of the herbs slowly. When working with these herbs, allow them to soak for 12 hours in cold water before bringing it to a boil and simmering. Oil infusions. The hot and cold infusion methods outlined below are used to infuse herbs into oil. For cold extractions in oil, cold actually means at room temperature. This method takes time. It takes 6 to 8 weeks to infuse herbs into a carrier oil using only time. The hot method is actually a warm method of extracting herbs into a carrier oil. Some herbs need the heat to extract, and this method also shortens the amount of time needed if you need the remedy sooner. Be careful not to boil or overheat the oil, as this alters the chemical compounds of the herbal properties you are extracting. Carrier oils and cold and hot infusions. To cold infuse oil, use only dried herbs to start, with a few exceptions, as moisture can make your oil turn rancid or mold. Many carrier oils will work. I prefer organic olive oil as it is temperature stable, well priced, and works well for salve making. It is important to purchase organic oils from somewhere with strict labeling laws, like California. Other good carrier oils are sweet almond oil, coconut oil, although it changes consistency with temperature, jojoba oil, baobab oil, tamanu oil, castor oil, grapeseed oil, argan oil, avocado oil, apricot kernel oil, emu oil, and many more. Rendered fat or tallow, like bear fat, can also be used. Cold oil infusion. 1 tear or crush the dried herbs, then lightly pack into a clean, sterilized glass jar. Fill a glass jar 1/3 full with dried herb. For some herbs, like cottonwood buds, I fill it well over half full. 2. Pour your high-quality organic olive oil, or other natural plant oil, over the herbs. Fill to within a ½ inch, 1.25 centimeters, of the top with your carrier oil. Mix well, removing all air bubbles. Cap and label with herb and date. 3. Store your jar for 6 to 8 weeks. Make sure you don't go longer than 8 to 10 weeks or your oil may go rancid. Cottonwood buds are an exception to this. I often kickstart certain herbs with a little heat by placing my glass jars in a water bath on low, see warm infusions below, for a day or two, and then storing for 6 to 8 weeks. 4. After 6 to 8 weeks, strain out the herbs using cheesecloth or a tincture press. Squeeze the cheesecloth to get all of the herbal oil out. Pour into a clean, sterile bottle or jar. This oil can be used directly for medicine or for making salves. Lasts about 1 to 2 years. Hot oil infusion. To infuse oils using heat, use a crock pot that has a warm or very low setting, or use a water bath on low on the stovetop. This works well for infusing several oils at once. 1. Tear or crush the dried herbs, then lightly pack into a clean, sterilized glass jar. Fill a glass jar 1/3 full. Photo taken by Nicole Apelian. With dried herb. For some herbs, like cottonwood buds or usnea, I fill it over half full. 2. Pour your high-quality organic olive oil, or other natural plant oil, over the herbs. Fill to within a ½ inch, 1.25 centimeters, of the top with your carrier oil. Mix well, removing all air bubbles. Cap and label with herb and date. 3. Place your glass jars in the crock pot and cook on low for 4 to 7 days, depending on the herb making. Sure the water in your water bath crock pot stays full. If you are using fresh herbs, leave the caps off the jars, letting the moisture evaporate out, and make sure no water gets in from your water bath. 5. Once cooled, strain herbs using cheesecloth or a tincture press. 5. Once cooled, strain herbs using cheesecloth or a tincture press. Pour into a clean, sterile bottle or jar. This oil can be used directly for medicine or for making salves. Lasts about 1 to 2 years.